Welcome. You're listening to Nuditea, a podcast where we get naked with our feelings while drinking tea. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Wendy. And on this podcast, we talk about food, travels, things we like, things we don't like. Today, we're talking about how our relationships with our parents and other parents has evolved over the years as we have gotten older and more mature.
But first, as always,
What tea are we
drinking? What tea you drinking, Wendy?
Barely made it, but I'm drinking super ginger from David's Tea.
Okay.
It
was just going to be legit hot water until we realized Wendy didn't put any tea in it.
I had an empty tea strainer in my mug and I was just sipping on hot water. You know, which is fine with me.
You love that.
But because this is new to tea, we gotta have some tea.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm drinking Gen Matcha. I think that's what it was.
Sure.
Okay. Well, I mean, I bought it for Wendy when I was in Japan. Doesn't remember the name of it.
I'm always like, I want to keep it for as long as possible, so I've been avoiding drinking it so as to not use it up.
Just like my mother's jam, which turned moldy. Because
Listen, tea, in theory,
should last
much longer than jam.
True.
So be good.
This one is very woody, and I really like that. Yeah, I mean,
woody. It smells sweeter than other Gen matchas that I've had. Which is nice, because I think
it's not your classic matcha taste for sure.
Oh, it's got that roasted rice flavor,
which
is Gen matcha. I don't know why I had to explain that. That is literally the definition of Gen matcha. Is it matcha or matcha? I can't remember.
I think matcha.
We've gone on about this too long. We have time restrictions.
Surprise.
So you're scheduled to start this podcast today.
Put that on mute. Does that matter?
I don't think so. I think it's muting, like, if anything pops up on my computer. I mean, we'll find out.
That's not good. It's fine. It'll be fine. You're checking it?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
We're
it's
fine.
Still picking up.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to start, which I kind of have realized I don't love doing, but we will see how this goes.
It's just because I feel like I always start, and I don't want to seem too dominant in these podcasts, so I need you to pick it up a little.
Okay. This is my fault, she's saying.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so we're gonna start with what was our relationships like with our parents when we were younger. And before we start, obviously when you're growing up, there has to be some rules and restrictions in order to mold you into the human you are, and hopefully those rules and restrictions that they put actually do lead you to that, like a very healthy, well-rounded, mentally stable human being. That's always the goal. So I think they relatively,
I would say both our parents, sets of parents succeeded on that point.
Yeah.
I it feels weird telling myself that I am well-rounded, but I feel like a well-rounded, mentally stable human being who knows how to respect others and myself. So I think they did a good job on us.
I think so.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of growing up with a lot of siblings. We learned to share, dealt with hand-me-downs. There was a lot of rules in the sense of 18 was a lot of the cutoff or the beginning where we could actually start doing the things they started restricting us on. So dating was one of them, which personally 18's a little late to be like, I guess you can date now. I'd say 16, even 15.
Well, my parents were like, don't date in high school, it'll ruin your life. And then in university, they're like, okay, now's the time to date. You gotta find yourself someone to be with for the rest of your life. And then we'll talk about that. It's a bad system.
It's a terrible system.
I mean,
we could talk about
it
right now.
We will talk about that in the restrictions episode.
Okay.
Yeah, we have an episode coming up to talk about different restrictions our parents enforced when we were younger, growing up. But that is not the topic of today.
That's true. So, growing up, there was also a lot of manual labor because we lived on the farm, and just being outside was very much pressed upon us. So there was lots, I've talked about rock picking and gardening and lawn mowing and just doing chores around the house so we could gain our allowance. And we got very tiny allowances compared to other people. But I think I've touched on that before. And they also spanked us, which is probably the scariest thing. I remember just fear. Dread and fear if we were ever to be spanked. And being the second youngest, I learned a lot of how to not be spanked and how to get away with things or just not do the things that my older siblings had kind of tried and pressed upon. I know that my second oldest sister, she tried to find a way to make it more bearable, and she would actually wear extra layers under like her pants to soften it, and they found out that she did that, and so they spanked her again for that.
Ouch, that's harsh.
Yeah. And I always knew that you always wanted mom to spank you versus dad.
No, I feel like your mom would be much more soft-hearted in that situation.
Yeah, I just definitely remember when you were like, oh, you're gonna get spanked, we've all been spanked, and then you found out it was dad, and you're like, oh my goodness. But relationship-wise, definitely mom was the person we went to if we wanted to ask her if we could do things, like go to a friend's house or just try something. I think that we knew would maybe not go over well with the parents. And so, because I always felt I could probably reason with her a little bit more and make her see maybe from my point of view. So you knew that you were more likely to get a yes from her. And that's not to say that mom's a pushover or anything. I think it's pretty reasonable to be like, oh, I guess we should let our kids try things.
Yeah.
If mom said no, you knew dad was going to say no.
Oof. Yeah.
And sometimes I'll be like, yes, I think that's fine, but as long as you asked your father and he says yes. And you'd be like, man, I was like this close.
Mom, come on. Just veto the decision, please.
Yeah. I don't know. Growing up, I do remember this area of fear, I think, that I felt towards my father at times. It wasn't always and constant, but I do know that you knew he was going to get angry or mad. I do wonder, was spanking necessary when I was a kid? Did I, like, not do things because I was being spanked? Or was there another way to kind of stop me from doing things? But again, I'm not a very rebellious kid. I think my parents, they have 6 pretty, like, good kids.
Yeah,
I don't think we ever acted out super rebellious or did anything pretty extreme. So I think in that sense, they probably got kind of lucky. And I also know that when I had friends over, I think they were also a little bit afraid of my dad. And I think there's this aspect of my dad might not know how to show his affection as well. And I mean, I think he grew up with parents who didn't know how to do that either. And so he wanted respect more than I think he wanted this child-parent relationship that was, I don't know, and his respect was very
fear-based. He wanted that kind of like
fear-based.
authority versus...
He'd rather you do what he said instead of...
you trying to reason with him because
Yeah.
just accept the orders.
Kind of, yeah, like that. So I just always knew to kind of avoid arguments with him while I had another sibling who very much pressed him on things, and those would turn into larger arguments. And so while I might not have gotten the like affection that I did from my father, definitely my mom took over in that area. She did a very good job, I think, for that. And again, that's not to say like my dad doesn't know how to show affection. He's just a little more stunted in, I think, that area.
Yeah, which is to do with his upbringing. So
And also the gender norms, right? It's not
true.
seen as like the father would display that kind of affection or hang out with the child as much as like in a different way than the mother would. Right. So that's also a product of their time. I understand that too. Do you think I touched upon?
So I guess to summarize, it sounds like your relationship and all of your siblings, all of your relationships with your mother are a bit closer. In terms of you have more things that you're able to discuss with her and maybe a little less fear involved when speaking to her about certain things compared to your dad.
Yeah. I think also if I had more common interests with my father when I was younger, that might have also harbored a stronger relationship. So there's just, I have a lot more interests that are similar to my mother, even when I was younger. And I do think that we, like as family, went on trips And so definitely, like, my dad would try to, like, do things with us. So it's not like he was completely absent or anything. Yeah, so I don't want to, like, just...
You don't want to make it sound like he was, like...
Because he wasn't...
babysitting once in a while.
No.
He was still a prominent figure in your childhood.
Yes, he was.
Just in terms of your relationship with your mother was... You would say that it was probably a little better compared to your father's.
Yeah.
I was actually probably the opposite when I was younger. My mom is very hot-headed and very stubborn, and she's not one to want to hear other people's explanations very often. She'll listen to other people, but it feels like she's not, which has also gotten better over time. But when I was younger, I didn't have that kind of presence that I have now as an adult, so they would kind of just throw whatever I was saying to the side and be like, oh, she's a child, like she doesn't know what she's talking about, which is already a little damaging to a child's self-confidence. But also that hierarchy in the family, you just can't get around it. It was always very fear-based. You have to respect your parents. And growing up in Canada, I kind of tried to adapt what I was seeing my friends do in their families to my own family, but it did just not work out. Like, they were able to just bring up a request to their parents and say, oh, I would like to go to this person's house for a sleepover, is that okay? Or, oh, I would like to, like, see this or do this or go on this trip. And that just did not go over well with my parents when we were younger, which is probably the case for a lot of families that are a bit more strict and a bit more conservative. So I felt pretty restricted growing up, not in just the sense that I couldn't physically go do things with other people, but also because the way I communicated with my parents was very different from other kids. I don't know if you were able to have more heart-to-hearts with your parents. Like, if you were feeling a certain way, were you able to tell your mother that you were feeling this way and why, and have them listen to you? Is that something that... Like, that's an actual question I want you to answer.
Sorry. Yes, no, I did feel that way, I think, for the most part.
Yeah. I think for me, my dad is much more reasonable, but he's also very conservative. Both my parents are conservative. It's just my dad is a bit easier to reason with. However, they were not well versed in positive reinforcement. A lot of
negative reinforcement.
Yeah, a lot of the fear that we, felt as children growing up being disciplined was because every bad thing that we did was negatively reinforced. And I also felt when I was younger, if I did something well, there would be zero feedback, or it would always be, okay, well then do better next time. So it was never, I was always reaching a certain point and never getting anything back.
They just kept moving. Yeah,
moving the standards up higher and higher. And if I did anything bad, it would be like huge punishments. Not huge punishments, but like emotionally traumatizing disappointment. And maybe like a little bit of yelling, a little bit of talking to. They rarely hit me that I can remember. I only remember one time in elementary school when I did do something bad that my dad like gave me a good smack over the head. But that's the only time I actually remember. Apparently my mom says they hit me more when I was back in China when I was very young. But after coming to North America, they kind of felt like it was unacceptable. That head spank was probably the only time that they hit me while in North America, I believe.
Do you remember what you were doing?
Oh, I remember.
What were you doing?
I can't tell you.
Okay.
Right now on this podcast. I'll tell you after.
Okay.
Secrets. So my relationship with my parents when I was younger was not the best. I felt like I couldn't talk to them about anything because anything good I told them, I wouldn't get any positive reinforcement back. And that sounds very entitled, but when you're young, like a little positive reinforcement can go a long way. Just a little like, oh, good job, like you tried your best, and you know, we know you can do better, but we're happy with these results. Like even that is a good way to push me, but also be like, oh, we're still happy with these results.
and probably being surrounded by, I'm assuming, primarily white kids and their white parents.
Yeah.
Where we tend to get positive reinforcement. While I might have gotten negative reinforcement, a lot of the time I have been given positive reinforcement by my parents. Yeah. So it's really probably confusing for you to be in China and then come over and you're like, okay, so this is what is happening with other people's parents.
You get complimented? What is that?
And you probably have this slight yearning.
Yeah.
To get
those for sure.
When everyone else is getting them.
Yeah. We also did not engage in any type of physical affection when I was younger. That was not a thing. It was in the Mao era. Fathers and daughters especially there needed to be some distance there, and mothers and daughters could be more affectionate, but also physical touching and sex was very taboo during Mao's era anyway, so no one touched anything.
Revisit our sex talk series. That's way back. We talked about that.
Yeah. So essentially, I did not have good communication with my parents when I was younger because I felt like they weren't hearing me out for anything. They would just get mad, or they would have no reaction or tell me to suck it up and move on. When these were, valid feelings for a young teenager to have in that phase where all your hormones are raging and you don't know what's going on, and all those get repressed because you can't tell anyone. And you can't tell your parents, the ones that are actually probably need to hear it the most. Yeah. So that was my big thing when I was younger.
When you're constantly being shut down, therefore you less likely will bring things up.
And I'm sure I'm making it sound very dramatic. I'm sure there were times that they were highly supportive and were proud of me. It's just, and they did stick up for me in a lot of situations if they felt like something was unfair that was happening in my life. So I'm not saying that they were totally no, you just go handle all this crap on your own and we only are here to criticize you from afar. No, they definitely did say nice things to me and they did help me out. It's just that from my memory, it felt very stuffy and a very fear-ridden environment because I couldn't tell them anything without being scared of being yelled at. Yeah. So moving on to the next phase. How has your relationship with your mother and or father changed as you have become an adult?
So my mother's has probably remained relatively consistent. As I'm older and I've learned more things, I'm able to bring up, I guess, harder topics or more topics that I really care about. And she's always been a very good listener, I think. And while both my parents are very conservative Christian, she's been able to handle certain things that we've kind of come to her with and just want to have an honest conversation with her. She doesn't always agree with everything, but you never feel like you didn't explore that issue with her. You never feel shut down. Right. So I'll say my thing, she'll say her thing, and we'll both just kind of go back and forth in a relatively lax debate. But so that's kind of there, and she's still sends me texts that begin with "Dear darling daughter," and then she'll always sign it off love, and then she's getting really used to those emojis.
Basically a love letter to her children once in a while in text format.
She doesn't get enough text from me, which I have said I'm really bad at that, and the bottom three siblings. Not the bottom three. The youngest siblings, we've all been kind of terrible at that, and then my older three siblings are just better at that. They always have been. So she's constantly affectionate, and when I'm there, constantly hugs. We get into the kitchen, and we're singing Barbra Streisand. Not well, but we do. And yeah, I always try to get that stuck in her head. This one's "People" is the song that I always try to get stuck in her head, and it never fails.
I know.
And she also I got older and we spent more time in the kitchen and I learned from her. So there's just, and we love musicals. She'll go into art galleries. She just loves to, I don't know, talk over
engage in the culture and conversation.
Yeah. So we just have more things in common and I really like spending time with her. With my father, I'm going to say from the lack of foundation, I think our relationship had when I was younger. And I do want to reiterate, he came to my rep basketball tournaments, and he was there for a lot of it, but there was always this kind of separation, I think I felt. So nowadays, it's going to sound terrible, but I'm very indifferent to our relationship. We're still very civil. And I do hug him, and I try to show him affection. I tell him I love him, because I do. There's just this...
You love him because he's your father.
And he did provide for me. And he was there in the best way I think he knew how to be.
Yes.
And
good effort.
And sometimes I feel like I'm putting more of the effort into what can, like, if he comes to visit, like, what should we be doing? And what does he want to do? But he's not really... I might give him ideas, and he won't decide on one, or he's not really showing me which one he would really like to do, and maybe I just haven't found those little things, but he's never suggesting things to me. And there's also this thing that comes up every single time where I might invite my mother up to come see a musical in Stratford, and he gets a little FOMO when it comes to if I didn't invite him, and that's not because I don't necessarily want him there. Sometimes it is that. But it's also like, I know he's not going to enjoy himself.
Right.
But should I be giving him that option? I probably should. But I do want him, but sometimes I feel like he comes up, and I gave him that option to come up, and sometimes I feel like he doesn't want to be here.
Right.
So
Which
I feel like
it's hard, because you've gone to plan these dates with your parents, and if one of them is kind of just being a bummer, then it kind of sours the whole mood of the trip.
But maybe he doesn't feel like he's projecting that. Like, that's the weird thing, and I probably have to have a better conversation with him. But I know he also gets a little defensive if I were to, like, kind of bring these things up to him. So it's really hard to start that dialogue, I think, without he feels like I'm either accusing him or blaming him of things.
Right.
So he still, like, sometimes, he also is kind of spontaneous in the sense he'll just be up in the area of Guelph, and he called me one time at like 6:30 in the morning. It was like, you want to get breakfast? It's like, I work kind of soon, and I want to get some sleep. But if he had told me the day before, I would have went to sleep earlier. So, like, he does, like, reach out when he's in the area, and I appreciate that. I just wish that sometimes he could see from my point of view why I don't necessarily invite him up all the time. And I have asked, like, can you guys come up separately? Because
it's you've said this before.
It's easier to plan. I've told him that, but I think he's either forgotten about this, or he doesn't feel like that's the reason I'm not. So I feel like sometimes when we talk, I can't get anything into topics that are anything but shallow and very surface level. Weather and like what I'm up to, and the big question I get asked is, oh, what are you doing? You're staying in Guelph, all that stuff, and that's fine, and just show that he's like a little bit interested. But I could never bring up like certain topics I bring up to mom, like bring up to dad, and that's just not like female things, lady things. Like, there's just things I can't talk to him about because I don't think he's interested in it, and that's fine. But I never feel like I can go on a deeper level, and so I find that I'm very indifferent to what a relationship is.
Which I feel like you seem guilty about it.
I do, but I'm trying to actually just not be guilty about it, because I do feel like I do try. Yeah. But maybe I do need to recognize it. He tries in his own ways. It's like, I don't get home very often, so maybe that's also a thing.
There's just many obstacles between you and your father and a wonderful father-daughter relationship. And a lot of that is coming from the lack of foundation as a kid.
Maybe I should just invite him up more.
Maybe. But then, like, what will you do?
I'll figure it out. He usually just likes going to go see a movie.
That's true. You guys do see movies.
So we can't do that. I just wish there was something more we could do that wasn't just looking at a screen and then talking about them. I do love talking about movies. That's no surprise.
Upcoming episode.
We'll see. So there is that. I just sometimes I think we should go on more walks, maybe, because he likes to do photography and kind of doing that, but I'm not really sure he loves to walk. So there's like a lot of me trying to figure out what he wants, but
he's not really giving you any hints.
Because maybe he doesn't really know what his hobbies are.
Yeah.
Sometimes I worry it's that too, and he doesn't feel like he can go looking for those hobbies or try something new because he's older. I'm not really sure. So I do feel guilty at times. Other times I don't. Sometimes I rant at you. You understand. You've been through that ranting sessions that I've had. So yeah, that's kind of where my relationship with my father is, and my mother's is. We're pretty much the same. It's very solid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And as for me, everything's fantastic, guys. I just came back from a lovely weekend spent with my parents, just the three of us. We basically just ate a whole bunch of meals together. We saw some other friends. I took my mom shopping, bought her a buttload of stuff because she really needed it. And the whole weekend basically was just a lot of open conversations, a lot of banter, joking around, kind of like hating on each other, me hating on them for, being so restrictive when I was a child, and then them hating on me for being such a not like rebellious in the sense that I went and did wild things. It was more just like my attitude. I had such a sassy attitude in periods in elementary school and in high school, especially in high school, because I was like most people's rebellious stage. So the changes from when I was younger to now is mostly communication, because I no longer fear them in the way that I did when I was younger, because they really don't have any control over what I'm doing day to day. They can't tell me like, oh no, you can't go see this movie at like 9 p.m. with these friends because you'll get back. No, like that doesn't...
You're not gonna go see movies anyway.
Exactly.
You're too poor and you're too tired by that time
Exactly.
anyway. So.
Didn't they do such just like a great job nailing these things into me when I was younger? Be home at night. It's too dark.
You live in a completely different country to them, so it's really hard for them to have any semblance of control.
So, and I'm so old now. Like, what are they going to try and do? Like, they can't cut me off financially. I have my own money. I'm doing my own things that they don't really and like, I have a solid relationship with my partner. It's like there's nothing else for them to worry about, which I think has relieved them of a lot of their burdens and stresses, and therefore my very repressed mindset.
Yeah.
So we had this kind of major talk the first year I was in Guelph, and we got in a pretty big fight, and I basically just like hashed it out with my dad, and I unloaded all of my feelings of repression and being like feeling like I wasn't heard by them as an adult, because at that point I was like 22 or something, and they were still treating me and talking to me as if I was incompetent and ignorant and didn't know how to like live my life in a way that was safe and secure and responsible, which is not the case. I was starting my master's at that point. I've been out.
You were like a year into your master's.
Yeah.
Because what came up, I think, was you wanted to live at the house still.
Yes. And they wanted me to rent out the room. Like, whatever, that conversation happened, and then we didn't see eye to eye on it, so got in a fight at the dinner table, and then my mom stormed out, and then my dad took my mom back to the hotel they were staying at. He came back, we hashed it out in the car, and it ended up in like me in just ugly cry sobs, and because it was so many feelings that were coming up from my teenage years and from my childhood that I had never ever had the chance to say to him, and being able to unload all that made me highly emotional, obviously. And basically he was able to see things from my perspective and understand why I had been feeling like this. And we like hugged it out, and he said that, I'm their daughter and they love me, and that's something that like never happens. Oh God, I feel like I'm gonna cry right now. It like that was probably one of the only times my dad has had like a one-on-one conversation with me and had said like, I love you, you're our daughter, like we love you a lot. So that was kind of a tipping point for me, because after that I really tried to speak to them as if we were just adults at the round table shooting the shits. Like I
Board
didn't...
Game Cafe. The round table?
Sure. However you want to think about this, Kim. And my mom, she's still quite like a volatile person, and I think I inherited some of that as well, and she's very stubborn, and she doesn't always want to hear things that other people are saying. But I found ways to maneuver her landmines and my own landmines, and that I think also comes with me being older. I'm able to understand and control my own emotions a lot better. So my parents have grown in ways emotionally. I have grown in ways emotionally. We have all reached kind of an understanding of where I'm at in life, and that has allowed for us to have a much better relationship. My mom and I, we had to talk about sex. If you heard our sex talk series, my mom asked me if I was having sex with my partner. That like is unheard of. If you told me that in high school, I would have been like, you're a liar, get out of my face. My mom would never do that. But she did it. Mm-hmm. It was not even like something I brought up. It was fantastic. So I feel a lot happier now that I'm able to spend time with my parents and not feel fear for saying things or doing things or them knowing things that might have upset them when I was in like high school. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would say with both my parents, A+ relationships.
Fantastic.
Friend zone.
They've been friend zoned.
Yeah, my parents have literally been friend zoned. Other parents that have been friend zoned are for you.
Yes. So Ben, who you've heard on the podcast and who we've mentioned on the podcast frequently, I love his parents. They're fantastic people. Mm-hmm. They're just fun. They always make you feel welcome when they're in their home, because Ben was living at home for a bit after he got back from Japan, and whenever I go visit, I was all like, oh, I'm also going to see his parents, which is always fun. We'll like go out places, or they're great at cooking, so whatever they have whip up is great. Mm-hmm. And Ben says the only way sometimes they get his mother to stop maybe working as hard as she does, because she does work from home, is if I'm coming down and he's like, we need more people for board games, she might take a break and actually hang out. And I've been trying to set up a day where we can go to the theater and go see Come From Away. Although she doesn't text me back, so she left me on red. Maybe she hates me.
Ghosted by Ben's mom.
The weird thing is, there's a lot of similarities in, I think, my dad's humor and Ben's dad's humor. But maybe because Ben's dad's not my dad, and I'm more likely to enjoy it, or, you know, sometimes you just, like, hate your parents' jokes.
You have this, like, preconceived feeling towards parents, and that's sometimes hard to come by, or to get over, rather. So I get that.
Yeah. Also, Ben's parents drink. And they're always all like forcing alcohol on me.
Another topic coming up in our restrictions episode.
It's always fun because I am very much old enough to drink. And so it's not like they're trying to get me hammered, but they're like, oh, try this. This is great. We picked this up.
Because that whole family is like very food sciencey, food lover people. So
I like Ben's parents so much. Literally, I went to go visit him at his new place. And then I set up the next day to go visit his parents.
Without him.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful friendship with some other people's, with parents, just, you know, not your own parents.
And that's always, I think, going to happen, right? Knowing, like, I wasn't raised by them, and I can...
Yeah. And they're not gonna, like, discipline you. There's no background of, like, childhood fear. It's always different coming from someone else's parents.
And I met them when I was much older, so even if I had been a teenager in their house and I was doing something wrong, they might have felt a little more like, don't do this. But I never met them at that age, so there's not that, I don't know, stigma or something towards them, like, come in.
That dark aura of fear.
They're just a fun time.
Yeah.
Try to get Ben's mom drunk whenever I'm there.
Stop working! You can rest!
And I want to touch on that. I don't know if you have any parents here also. My mother?
Well, I love your mother so much, but I don't get to see her very often. We're not in, like, regular contact. I guess the people, the parents that I'm most in contact with are my own, and then my partner's parents, who have been long-term family friends, so we've always been close, but now that the kids are in a relationship, I communicate with them a lot more. So, like, we call and we chat for hours on end, and it's a very just relaxed relationship where I'm able to say things that I'm feeling, and then they respond. It's like just, you know, normal friend stuff. And also with another set of family friends who live in Toronto, I visit them all the time. They're also another set of parents that I would say I'm very, very comfortable with. They've known me since I was very young. And, they've had to discipline me in the past, I'm sure. They've had to deal with my, nonsense as a child. But, again, it's not your own parents, so it's very different. Mm-hmm. And because I've known them for so long, I almost see them as my other set of parents who are just less, I don't know, less concerned. Yeah, less concerned about my day-to-day nonsense doings. Mm-hmm. They're just there for me to chat with, to update and support me when I need them to. They're just lovely, lovely people. They also feed me a lot of food and they take me out for food. So it's it's a win-win. And their daughter is very far away, so I'm their surrogate daughter. I visit them and I engage them in, parent-daughter activity so that they don't feel so much FOMO because I'm very close to my parents.
You like to be adopted by people and as well as adopt other people. You
yes.
just feel like you're part of my family now and you're part of my family.
A gigantic family. Mm-hmm. That's my goal.
So you always have places to crash. That's actually the real goal. Free accommodation and food.
Free accommodation and people willing to get you food.
Yeah. Wendy, the greatest con artist you have ever seen. So, I love both my parents. They've been very supportive. They've never felt like I couldn't do whatever I wanted. So that's really important. I never felt like because I'm a girl, I couldn't choose a certain path. They're like, I will do whatever. They're also pretty okay with me chilling and not really doing anything with my life right now. They don't really pressure me, or they've learned to not pressure me because that clearly doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
They made sure I had lots of interests as a kid and tried a lot of things, and they supported me with financially and doing sports. I know that costs a lot for a lot of parents, and they did a really good job teaching me good finances and how to control my money because I saw them doing a very good job with a large family, how they were doing that. And I did get a lot of emotional affection from my mother in particular. And I think sometimes people really lean upon the whole, that girl has daddy issues. I don't think I've ever had those. And I don't necessarily think whatever my dad did or didn't do has super affected me negatively.
Okay. That's good. That's good. I mean, I think you're trying to make it sound as positive as possible, but I almost feel like you're just let me just backtrack and say that my dad did not traumatize me, even though he did not give me enough affection, and
probably because I got enough of it from my mom.
Yeah, I mean that's good.
I was provided in many aspects of my life from different amounts of different kinds from my parents. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Which I think...
That's my positive note.
If you had a well-rounded childhood in terms of parenting, that means both your parents played a part. So we should be thankful for that. I'm sure you are. I don't know why I made it sound like you need to be grateful for everything that they've done for you. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. But the point is, I'm also very grateful for my parents' upbringing because I feel like they did a great job. I feel like I'm very happy with who I am as a person now, and that has a lot to do with them. So everything that I said about feeling fear and repressed in childhood, that's all come to a very happy ending for me because now I have none of those feelings. I've learned to communicate with my parents so that everyone's very happy, very lovey-dovey. My mom says I love you all the time now, which is crazy insanity. I'm so uncomfortable with it. Every time she says it, I'm like, I love you too. And then she hugs me. I'm like, here you go, pat, pat, pat. And it's still kind of new for me because we didn't have that as a kid. But because we're at this stage now, it feels wonderful. I'm finally becoming the white family that I always wanted to be.
I'm very happy for you. I'm glad you were able to get to that place.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Nudity. Anywhere you get your podcast, you can probably find us there for the most part. Let us know if you can't. I don't know. But the people who are listening, we all know you can. But Wendy also has the video version of the podcast.
Guys, the video version this time is going to be a hot mess.
Got a new camera. Wendy's trying to figure out
how I don't know how to use this camera.
But that'll be up probably before I finish my audio version because apparently I'm real slow at that. We do apologize if you cared about being away for so long, but Wendy has a busy life. I have a busy life. We just had to take a short hiatus, sabbatical.
We both needed it, I think.
I think so. But we're back, and we're going to try to be more consistent again. I think that's all. That was not the best closer, but I forget how we close these things.
Yeah, I think it's different every time because we forget every time.
We're so good at this. Okay. Bye.
Bye.